This is the worst state of the UFC since Conor McGregor showed up and made UFC a mainstream sport. You may be wondering, the UFC is breaking all these financial records. Every time there's a fight night at a new arena, Dana comes out and says they broke the gate record. But that means nothing, and I'll prove to you why the UFC is at an all-time low. As much as the UFC is an international business, most of the money comes from American-based resources. So not having the UFC champion after John Jones retired that's based in the US is a huge problem for the UFC. And to pile onto that, the international fighters that are champions, barely any of them actually sell like they used to. If you go through the pound-for-pound rankings, Ilya and Islam are both bona fide superstars that sell. Volk is kind of on the decline, and it's hard for him to sell without having a good competitor with him. Merab can't headline a pay-per-view by himself. Ankalaev can't headline a pay-per-view unless it's Alex Pereira who he's fighting. That's the only reason he's getting a headliner. Pantoja can't headline a pay-per-view by himself. DDP is iffy, but he's fighting Hamzat, so it'll be a huge fight, so he can. Jack Della Maddalena can't headline a pay-per-view by himself, but he's fighting Islam, so he can. And then you go through the champions. Tom Aspinall can headline a pay-per-view. So if you go through the champions, half the champions can't headline a pay-per-view by themselves, and they need somebody else to boost the card up. And to add more onto that, the UFC signed a media rights deal with ESPN where they have to put on a certain number of UFC events every year. So they're having an event almost every single weekend for the entire year. Well, that means they have to spread out the fights more because they need a main event for every fight night card. Well, what does that do? That drops the level of pay-per-views down, and when you can't have champions headline because their star power isn't enough, you have to do either double championship fights, or you end up putting on a Bilal Muhammad versus JDM pay-per-view, or you start doing BMF titles like Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier, just trying to fill pay-per-views. So they don't have star power. They don't have American fighters that are doing well. They tried their hardest to get Sean O'Malley back to being a champ, but he's never going to beat Merab. And Dana White's having to scramble trying to make fights that are pay-per-view worthy, that are fight night main events worthy, and the UFC's in a bad state, and they need to figure out how to get some champions that can sell because they are desperate for it. Oh, and the reason the UFC are breaking all these financial records is because of inflation, not because the UFC's doing better. Pay-per-views are down, illegal streaming's up, and Dana White's trying to cover it up by saying they're breaking all these financial records. They're just charging more for the tickets. They're going to have UFC fans fill the arena no matter what. That's not their problem. But they're just upping the tickets by 500%, so of course they're going to break financial records.